everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are using the Distress Watercolor Pencils. I got these for Christmas of 2023 and I've just started to use them. I've really been inspired by Amy R on Prairie Paper and Ink here on YouTube. She has been using them a lot in recent videos and it inspired me to start to use mine a little bit more and experiment. So we're going to make a 5x7 card today. So I had a piece of black cardstock there that was 10 by 7, and I scored that in half on the 10-inch side at 5. So that gives me a 5x7 card base. I am going to have to do a little bit of trimming on that later, but the goal was 5x7. I also had a piece of acetate there. I purchased this acetate off of Amazon, and that was 6x7. So we can create kind of like a fun, clear front to our card. I have this set from Altenew. This is Gracious Peonies. I have had this in my stash for some time and I've really wanted to use it. In fact, I have a couple more ideas for this in later videos. For my sentiment, it is actually coming from this set from PinkFresh Studio. This is, wait for it, Just a Hello Floral. What's really cool about this is that it has these two floral images here that you can either put together and put your sentiment in the middle, or you can, use them separately. I have some inspiration for this video, for this stamp set, boy howdy, in an upcoming video. But that's where our sentiment is coming from today. I have my Altenew watercolor brushes and I have just 4 colors of these Distress Watercolor Pencils today. I have Spiced Marmalade, Picked Raspberry, I have Twisted Citron, and Peeled Paint. I am going to help myself out a little bit and I'm going to create some wells. So I have some VERSAFINE Onyx Black ink that is a pigment ink that I really, really like. And I also have some clear embossing powder from Ranger. One of the first things I'm going to do is I have some Canson XL watercolor paper here and I'm going to stamp my images. Now this Canson watercolor paper, I really like it. First off, it's dirt cheap and it's very accessible. I live in East Texas and so like really fancy like craft stores are not really an option for me, but like Hobby Lobby and even Walmart has this paper. So it's very accessible for me. And it's very inexpensive, but use whatever watercolor paper you have on hand. And this watercolor paper actually has a smoother side and a rougher textured side. And I chose for this particular application today to use the rougher side. I usually use the smoother, but because I was really going for that watercolored look, I chose to go with the more textured side. This stamp set is very large. This is like a 5.5 or 5 3/4 by like almost 7.5 inch panel of cardstock here. So it is very large and I'm just beating the fire out of my anti-static powder tool just so that I can get some good coverage here and I don't have embossing powder sticking everywhere. This paper is really, really dry and so I didn't really worry about, and I was going to be using clear embossing powder, so I wasn't really too concerned about embossing powder getting where I didn't want it, but it's always a good habit to always apply your anti-static powder first. This is a brand new stamp. I've never used it before, so I do the lazy man's way of conditioning stamps, and I just run my hand over it. Altenew has a stamp conditioning eraser. People have used VERSAFINE. People have just stamped it several times, and honestly that is the best way to condition a stamp, is just to use it. The more you use it, the more seasoned it gets and it stamps beautifully the more you use it. I do end up having to stamp this a few times and I'm going to do this on 2 panels. This is very large and if I just wanted to have this image, if I was more careful or strategic on how I place this image, it would fill my 5x7 card just fine. However, that's not what I was really going for today. I wanted it to be a little different. I wanted it arranged a little different. So I do stamp this a few times, mainly because I am using the textured side of this watercolor paper, not because of any fault of the stamp or the ink, just because of the texture on this watercolor paper. And I'm going to repeat this for the other panel too. But while this is still kind of wet, I am going to go ahead and sprinkle on my clear embossing powder. Again, this is from Ranger, and it is a detail embossing powder, which is good because there are some finer lines and some pretty details on this image, and I want to make sure that I capture those. So I will stamp this and then sprinkle on that embossing powder and repeat that for the second panel. I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiments while I have all of my stamping things out. So this is from that Just a Hello floral set from PinkFresh Studio, and this is all one stamp. So what is beautiful, and a lot of companies are doing this now, and it is such a glorious convenience, is they are putting multiple images or multiple sentiments on one stamp, and they are doing the same with the coordinating die. So that means that you can get, let's see, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentiments here. And when I run this through my die cut machine, I get 5 sentiments all in one pass. I don't have to align each little sentiment up with 5 different sentiments, sentiment dies. It's all one die that cuts out in one fell swoop all 5 of these sentiments, and it is glorious. I figured since I had the stamp set out, I would just go ahead and make another one of these and just stamp it twice so that I could have more sentiments on hand. Why not when you already have everything ready to go? Then I'm going to go ahead and heat set my floral images here. You know that it is heat set, and it's really easy to see on this particular image when your heat embossing powder is, or when your embossing powder is set, because it's no longer grainy, it's shiny, and it's smooth. So it's really easy to see here. It becomes, instead of kind of like a gray, it becomes black. So I'm going to continue to heat set both of these panels, and I have discovered that I get much better results if I heat set from the back instead of heat setting from the front where the embossing powder actually is. I just find that I get much smoother results that way, but you heat set however you choose. I have just found that this works a lot better for me. Now I have my Altenew, these are their Artistry line watercolor brushes, and I have my 4 different colors of Distress Watercolor Pencils here. I have Spiced Marmalade, Picked Raspberry, Twisted Citron, and Peeled Paint, and I have the number 5 and the number 6 watercolor brushes here. So I do several methods. I was just playing. I was trying to practice. I was trying to get to know this medium. And the best way to do that is just to do what I did. And that's experiment. I think I ended up doing like 4 or 5 different ways of applying color. And the first one I did here is I applied clean, clear water to these little wells. So because we heat embossed, it creates almost like a dam around each individual like petal or each individual like section of these images. And so that will help hold the water and the pigment in place. So you normally, when you watercolor, you cannot work on 2 sections that are next to each other because they will bleed together and you'll lose any definition. But because we have this heat embossing, that does not matter. So what I did is I did what's called a wet on wet technique, and I applied clean, clear water to whatever it was that I was about to apply pigment to. And then I took that wet paintbrush and I just touched that to these watercolor pencils and then applied that wet pigment to that wet section. And this is called a wet on wet technique. And for this flower, for this die cut, for this image here, I was applying the pink toward the base where I felt like there would be some more shadow, and I was applying this spiced marmalade toward the outside of the petals. I end up switching that for the other image, but this is how I did this. Later, I try to do kind of a wet on dry. So here I apply the ink a little different. Here I'm just, I've wet the section and I'm just applying the paint to, or not the paint, the watercolor pencils where I want them. And I discovered with this Spice Marmalade, it just wasn't applying the ink or the pigment very well. So I actually dipped it directly into my water. And now I'm going to take my paintbrush and try to get those to blend. I think of all the techniques I tried, and as you can see, like the one on the left, yes, it has started to dry, but I didn't get as much vibrancy. I really wanted these to be very bold, very vibrant color, because we're gonna put them on that black card base. And so I really wanted there to be a lot of contrast, just very bold and in your face. And I wasn't getting that. So here I went back and am just directly applying the pencil to the paper. And if I have harsh lines, then I use my paintbrush. And as you can see, like there is a lot more color there, a lot more saturation. It's much more vibrant. And here I'm doing, this section of this petal is dry. And I at first scribbled just kind of a dry pencil on there, on a dry section, and I wasn't getting any pigment. And I was like, okay, well, and then I dunked it in the water. And I found that this was my favorite way to apply these watercolor pencils. I ended up abandoning my paintbrushes altogether, not because they weren't working, not because I don't like them, but because I liked this method a whole bunch more. And I learned this from Amy R. Like I said in the intro, she has been using these pencils a lot more in her videos, and she did this. She was directly dunking them in water, softening them, getting the pigment to kind of flow a little more easily. And that's how she was applying her color. And I was like, that's brilliant. And after trying those other 2 or 3 methods, I was like, nah, I'm gonna try this. And she's right. And it was such a beautiful, bold, saturated color. So that's how I applied it from here on out. This one I tried again to kind of do the wet on dry, or no, excuse me, the dry on dry. And I tried the paintbrush again, and I was like, okay, well, let me just see, you know, now that these pencils are a little more softened, maybe I'll get some more saturation. It's better, but not great. So again, I completely abandon all other methods and I just end up dunking the pencil in the water and applying that to the dry cardstock, to this dry watercolor paper. And that's how I do that for all of the florals. On the next set of florals, I do the reverse. I do the pink toward the ends of the petals, and I do the orange toward the base. Just for a little bit of variation. It's not super noticeable, I don't feel, but I just wanted to try something different just to see if I would like it more. And that's what this video and using these pencils has really been, is just experimenting. Watercolor is not my go-to medium, and so just trying different things, trying, you know, the products that I have on hand. One of the reasons why I chose this particular stamp set to use these pencils is because there were such bold images that had a lot of open space. So I could play with color, and do I like wet on wet? Do I like wet on dry? Do I like going direct to paper and then trying to blend it out? In this case, do I like to dip the pencil in the water and then try to blend it out from there, which is what I found I liked the best. If I were wanting a more like pastel look, I would probably stick with what I originally did, or have a dry pencil on dry paper, scribble the ink down or the pencil down where I wanted it, and then use the brush. That would give me a much softer application. And maybe that's your jam. Maybe bold is not your thing, and that's absolutely fine. But I was just wanting to play, and I had this image in my head of what I wanted this card to look like, and it had bold color. That's another reason why I chose these particular 2 colors, is they're next to each other on the color wheel, and so they will play nicely together, they will blend nicely together, but also they will be super, super dramatic on a black card base. I'm going to move on to the greens now. So for the greens, I am doing the same thing. I didn't even try. I didn't even try the other methods with the green. I just went directly to dunking it in the water and putting the pigment on the paper. But this one, I tried to keep the Twisted Citron, which was my lighter of the two colors, around the edges of the the leaves, and the peeled paint closer to the center of the leaves and where I felt like maybe there would be a shadow. So if there was a petal of the flower going over it, or it was tucked behind something, I would add shadow there because that's where naturally a shadow would fall. And that's how I did that to both of these panels. These flowers, I actually let these dry overnight. I didn't have to let them dry that long. That was just family and life that happened. And so these had a long time to dry. And I do end up having to heat set these just to make sure they were completely dry, just so that I can move on. Something to note, and Amy R. mentioned this in her video also, the more you dunk these pencils in water, the softer they get. So be conscious of that. I set the picked raspberry and the spice marmalade next to one another, and when they dried, they kind of dried stuck together because they were so softened at that point that they just kind of melded together. I'm able to kind of scrape off the pigment from one of them, and it's no big deal. It doesn't harm them, but you don't want to necessarily go throwing them in a box or, anything like that, because they are very soft at that point. So just kind of be careful of not chucking them around and being rough with them. But that's how I'm going to apply the pigment to both of these images. And then I'm going to set them off to the side to dry. Because we are going to be making a clear acetate kind of overlay to this card, I wanted to be able to hide my adhesive. So here I'm just cutting off a panel of the same black cardstock that my card base is made out of, just so that I can end up hiding this adhesive that's going to go on the back of this acetate. So I'm just trimming that down to roughly 4 7/8 by 6 3/4 ish. Then I'm going to take my acetate. So if you remember, this measured 6 by 7, and on the 6-inch side, I'm going to score this at 1. That will give me a 1-inch flat and a 5-inch large panel that will be essentially the front flap of our card. And because this is acetate, I get pretty aggressive with my scoring, and I also get pretty aggressive with my burnishing. So here's my card base here. I end up covering up my logo there, but that's okay. I can always come back and stamp that later. So this is what we're going for. We want to have that, sorry for seeing my unmakeuped face and distorted, crazy looking face. So I'm going to add some score tape to this. I purchased this tape off of Amazon. It's not actually like the brand score tape, but it has worked very well for me. But that's where I get it. And all you do is I'm just going to apply 2 little strips to the inside panel. So where it kind of wants to fold in, I'm going to apply the adhesive there. This way, when I take off the backer, I'm just going to align that fold on the left-hand side with the fold of my card base. And then I will adhere those together. And then this will give me like a front acetate flap to our card. So you can see that here. Here's our little acetate panel, and then here we actually open up to the card. So to cover up that adhesive, and I miscut it a little bit, I do have to trim it a little bit. So the card is not exactly 5 by 7, but it's close enough for government work. So I'm going to take that to my trimmer and just kind of trim that up a little bit. While I was doing that, I also cut out 2 more of these Gracious Peonies floral images. This is to hide our adhesive. So if exposed adhesive is not an issue for you, that doesn't bother you, you can absolutely skip that step. But I wanted to kind of hide that. So we're going to not only hide that adhesive on the back of our card using that black panel that we cut, and I'm going to use tape runner to adhere that down. This is just AdTech adhesive tape runner. I purchased this off of Amazon also, but any tape runner you have, or you can even use that score tape again. So I'm just going to adhere this down and kind of cover up that adhesive, and that's why we cut 2 of those plain white panels again, just so that we can kind of clean up and polish up our card when it's done. Something I want to show you is that when I was done heat setting this, I noticed that some of the pigment was sitting on top of my heat embossing, and I really didn't like that. I wanted it to be a little cleaner. So what I've taken is just a little piece of paper towel. I've dampened it just enough to just essentially be damp. And then I'm going to scrub over, not hard, but with a little bit of force, over the embossing that has some of our pigment sitting on top of it that's making it kind of dull. And I'm going to do that over the leaves, the flowers, all of it. There were just some spots where the pigment, I think, got a little heavy. I think I got a little heavy-handed, and so it was sitting on top of the embossing powder, and the embossing powder wasn't able to resist it. But once you wipe over it just a little bit, it comes off and it's absolutely fine. You don't want it to be super damp or super wet, because then you will actually reactivate your painting, your inking, and you can make things start to move again. In the end of it, I did notice that I got maybe a little careless, and so I did have some of the pigment move out of the borders of my heat embossing. I do try to clean that up with a jelly roll pen in the end of the video, but it's not very effective. It kind of failed me this time, but there I'm showing you that it kind of helped clean up some of that embossing powder and bring back that shiny, deep, rich black. So now it's time to put our card together. We have all the components ready. So what I've done is I've taken each of our colored images, I flipped it to the back, and I've added more of that AdTech adhesive. Off screen, I figured out how I wanted this to be arranged, and I'm just going to apply these images down. I am going to keep the pieces that I cut off. That way I can fill in gaps. So for me, I find it easier to work from the back. So I flipped this to the back, and I'm going to take a long pair of scissors and just trim these flowers off as carefully as possible, because I am going to use those cut off pieces to fill in gaps. Like I mentioned before, if I wanted to arrange this a little different, I could have let this one image, I could have just colored in one image and had that fill in this 5x7 card, but I wanted this to be arranged a little different. And so I had to have 2, and I am keeping all of these little cut off pieces just because I can use them to fill in gaps. Once I was done with that, I even adhered the sentiment down, doing the same thing, and there I was showing you that you can see the adhesive. So that is why we cut out 2 more of those Gracious Peonies dies from just white cardstock, so that we can cover up that adhesive from being showing. I'm just going to continue to fill in the gaps, and then we will start to add in the white to clean things up. Because these are going on the inside of the card, I'm actually applying adhesive to where it's the front. So I would normally apply adhesive to the back, but because this is going to cover up our coloring, I needed to apply this to the front, what would have been where we would have stamped if we would have die cut this first. Now, because this one is backed up into the corner, and obviously that's in a fold, I can't just willy-nilly cut it. So I just lined it up on the front. My adhesive is actually touching my fingers. It's exposed, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this section off right here. And then I can, once I have this cut off, I can actually just butt that up into the corner and cover up this adhesive. So let me show you here. Let me get all the things out of the way so that I don't accidentally stick something to it. Here I've just butted that up into the corner and am just laying that down. And so now we don't see the adhesive anymore. And that's what I really wanted to do. So I'm going to repeat that for all of it, applying adhesive to the front and just covering up all of that exposed adhesive and trimming off any excess that is there. Here I am taking a Sakura Jelly Roll pen at 0.08 in white and trying to clean up some of the ink that went astray. It's not very effective, and I don't know if it was because my pen is maybe drying out or it's running out of ink, or if it just wasn't very receptive to this particular cardstock. I'm not entirely sure, but it wasn't very effective this go around. One of the things I could have done is colored that in black. If you don't like that white border showing, you could have absolutely colored that in with like a black Sharpie or a black Copic marker and gotten rid of that white die cut outline altogether. But I kind of liked the white, and I felt it helped kind of tie in the white background of our sentiment also. So this is our card complete. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I hope you felt inspired, and we will see you next time. Bye.